Good morning. Happy Tuesday. Hope you guys enjoyed Knives Out yesterday, the film scoring assignment. So far, the submissions are terrific. String quartet, I know, I'm becoming a little bit harder on you guys because you guys can take it, but there needs to be some parameters. So, very proud of that. Really good work for that. So get it into me by today. By the end of today would be terrific. Today's, it's kind of a patriotic week because next week's 4th of July, so it's Monday, so we'll be off Monday. So I was thinking a lot about what to do with who we should talk about, and we've done so many American composers. This one sticks out as somebody that I didn't know that much about, and we're going to learn together. We're going to look at the real genius of William Grant Still. So with today's class, we're gonna understand that we've talked about the American sound and what that sounds like, but we're also gonna see the American sound and the huge influence from Europe, because we can't disregard that. Obviously, America was so great for blues and jazz, and we've talked about that. And then we've seen a little bit of the influence that from Scott Joplin, and Debussy. They liked Scott Joplin a lot. So Americans are doing their own music, but with Still, we're going to see his hugely popular European education and influence, but also how he's going to take that and create a new style of music, third string, which we've talked a little bit about, 1950s, 60s, mixture of classical and jazz. He's doing this in the 30s. How does he do it? Let's dive in. Okay, so American composer, nearly like hundreds of works, symphonies. We're going to take a look at one of them, ballets and operas, and he's a first for a lot of reasons that we'll talk about, and that's important, but it's also important because he wrote some really good music. That's most important. That's what we like to, even though that's subjective, that's what we like. That's why we're here for. Born 1895. Yep, you guessed it. We're gonna have to look at our timeline because we know when that was, but who else is going on there? So he's right around Duke, right? Duke Ellington is popular, and he's going to be doing a lot of arrangements for Duke Ellington later. Aaron Copland's around here, so he's growing up with the start of the 20th century. Gershwin is around here. We're going to see some Gershwin influence from one of his symphonies, and I put Ravel there because one of the pieces we're going to listen to, so much influence from Ravel, but not a ripoff at all. If we're going to take a close listen, very jazz-like. And Ravel was jazz-like, but this Still is even more, almost. So that's what's going on. 20th century, Tin Pan Alley starting. Still is going to do jazz and classical music, so we'll see. And then let's get over there. Let's leave Hollywood and let's go to Little Rock. I mean, this is where he grows up, in Little Rock. And studies violin at about age 14, and it was self-taught a lot. Studied oboe, studied cello. And then entered the Wilberforce University, so that's in Ohio, and got a lot of experience conducting. So he got a good education. He went to Oberlin College, studied theory, so got a very good classical education, and also studied at New England Conservatory, and was studied with Varese. We haven't talked about Varese, but a very avant-garde composer, and Varese was a really big proponent of his music, even though their music sounds nothing alike. Isn't that great? That's what a great teacher should do. Varese was also a teacher, but also a great composer. And I'm not going to get you to try to sound like me, and I'm not going to downplay or belittle your talent. You have this voice. Remember Nadia Boulanger, one of the greatest teachers of the 20th century? She's like, well, I see your original voice here. So don't try to be like somebody else, and don't try to be like I tell you to be. I'm going to give you the tools and the training, but then I want you to go off and do that. But, you know, Still's training was, a good mixture of jazz and classical. So he wrote a lot of jazz arrangements for Artie Shaw, who we talked about, and Paul Whiteman and Duke, and did a lot of jazz arrangements. So he's already doing classical and jazz together, and he's really trying to blend these two together in a way that doesn't seem so much like, hey, I'm going to try to blend it. We're gonna take a look at a symphony. And I mentioned third stream. We've talked about that kind of music, but that's really in the 50s, 60s. He's doing this in the 30s. He's really becoming one of the first classical jazz composers. I mean, we can't not acknowledge his first. I mean, he was the first African-American composer to have a symphony performed by a really, established professional orchestra in the United States. That's huge. That's his Symphony No. 1. We're going to look at that symphony, conducted by Howard Hanson, who was a composer in his own right. And it was a New York premiere given by the New York Philharmonic at the famous Carnegie Hall. So that was in 1935, but he wrote it a few years earlier. So first black composer to have a real orchestra perform his work. Also first African-American to conduct a major symphony orchestra. And that symphony orchestra, the LA Philharmonic. So that's in 1936. He moves from New York right around 1935 to Los Angeles. And also opera. Treble Island was the first African-American composer to be performed by a major opera company. So he's the first for a lot. 1949. Also, it was nationally televised. So the first in a lot of things, because this is, when obviously, African-Americans didn't have much of a voice. They did with jazz and classical, but not so much of a commercial, widespread voice, because this is way before Civil Rights Act and all that stuff. So, but it's you can't deny the importance of black music that we've talked about, going back to Joplin and other composers. So the first, those are pretty remarkable, especially in a time when especially the country and perhaps some of the world is oppressing black people, especially people that are wanting to be in the classical world. What's this kind of music doing especially jazz music doing in the concert hall? Bernstein's going to really make that opening, but not till like 20 years later. 30s is very, very early, so it's good that we're excavating into seeing what happened before. So we're going to look at two works. We'll start with just kind of a smaller solo piano one. This is Three Visions. This is 1935, and we're going to look at the second movement. So take a listen to Summerland. Gorgeous, very romantic, very much like Ravel, right? This is Ravel. We're listening to Ravel here, water flowing, all that stuff. And Ravel's writing, in France. Still's writing this right in Los Angeles, pretty much, right in the 1930s. So we can't dismiss the influence of Ravel, because, as I said before, we're going to see the American sound, but the influence from Europe. So he's going to write like Ravel, but he's going to be more jazz-like, much more jazz harmonies, minor nines, major sevens, stuff that I personally love. That's going to be in his music. It's very romantic, not avant-garde at all. So we're getting kind of a jazz classical feel that is beautiful. Second piece we're going to listen to is his Afro-American Symphony. So this is his Symphony No. 1. This is an A flat major. I'm saying A flat because we're going to see that, well, I wonder if I should play it first and see if you can hear what it sounds like. It's blues, right? It's a 12-bar blues progression in A flat, going to the 4, going to the 5. I mean, what's blues doing in a symphony orchestra? Maybe the first person to do this, because this is written in 1930. Rhapsody in Blues 1924, but that's jazz and blues like, but that's not a blues progression. Still's doing an exact blues progression in an orchestra. Crazy. Also using a full orchestra with celeste. That goes back to Tchaikovsky. But pretty new instrument, because Tchaikovsky, you know, it was 40 years before or something like that. Also a banjo. So he's really saying, I'm doing a different sound in here, having a banjo with a symphony orchestra. Very crazy to do that. This is the first time a banjo had been in a symphony orchestra. And this is him saying, we're coming up with a new kind of music. I'm going to put some blues and jazz into the symphony orchestra. This seems crazy today. It must have been insane in the 30s for the concert-going people to hear this kind of music in the concert hall. But you can't deny that it's really great music. This is kind of what Gershwin's sounding like too. And this piece reminds me of Gershwin. I don't know, a little bit. And Bernstein. But Bernstein's not going to do this for another 20 years or so, 15 years. So that's William Grant Still. Amazing composer. African-American, the first of many. And I thought he deserved a class for sure. Lives a long time, 1978 he dies, so dies at the age of 83. So this is a patriotic American week, so, you know, it's great to look at an American composer. So I hope you enjoyed that. Tomorrow is going to be more American stuff. That's going to be a lot of fun. So great rest of the day. Love you guys. Thanks for watching, and see you tomorrow. Okay, bye.